Welcome to Shakti Day One, where we are talking to Shakti founders who are reimagining toothbrushes, which are large, frequent use cases. Today, I'm talking to Sarah Ahmad, the co-founder and CEO of Stable. Welcome, Sarah. It's so great to see you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's jump right into it. You have started, as far as I can tell, a mail company. So tell me a little bit about how you chose, like what does Stable do and what is the status of mail these days?
Yeah. So we're automating a lot of operations for companies. And so we've started at one of the most challenging pain points, which of course is where the business address and mail comes in. And so even though here we are in 2025, every single company has to deal with this nonsense. So every company needs a business address that they use with the IRS, vendors, state government. And then the byproduct of using that address is that the main way that a lot of these antiquated agencies will get in touch with businesses is through physical mail. And so you have information about your state filings, your tax IDs, all coming in through physical mail. And so we digitize all of that and provide customers with an AI-powered dashboard to manage physical mail online. And so we've grown to work with over 10,000 companies now. So from your early stage solopreneur that's just getting started to large enterprises like GitLab, Rune Realty Income.
Amazing. You also have amongst your customers Shakti Venture Capital.
Yeah.
We are a proud Stable customer. And for all of those reasons that you just described, we love Stable because you solve so many of our problems. Because yes, we are in the digital age, but things still arrive in paper and envelopes that are really, really important, and we need to deal with them. So to make all of it real, can we just go into, give me a scenario, like piece of mail from the IRS, the Department of Labor, comes to Shakti, but I never see it in my office here in New York City. So what happens to it? Like, take me on the journey of
And
mail.
the pro for you all too is I know you all have moved around different co-working spaces, offices, and so you never have to worry about updating your address with all these different vendors. And so for a lot of customers too, it's the peace of mind wherever you go.
Yes.
We're going to take care of you.
Yes.
So we receive a piece of mail for Shakti. We barcode everything. That's how we keep track of. So you can imagine just a mini Amazon warehouse setting behind the scenes, right, to actually manage the mail. So we scan it all in the envelope. We also, so most customers opt to have their mail open and scanned because of course you need to know what's inside of it. And so we'll do all of that for you too. So we open it up, we'll scan in the internal PDF, and then it's uploaded to the dashboard.
My dashboard,
you get notified.
our Stable dashboard.
Yeah. So very easy to use. And then for a lot of our larger customers, we have a lot of workflows that they'll automate on top of that. So say they're wanting to deposit checks with us, they're pushing some of the information around check numbers, invoices into QuickBooks. So there's a lot of different workflows that people build on top of Stable to automate more than just the mail, but actually what happens after it as well.
Exactly. And I think even though I said you're a mail company, you're obviously so much more, and you have such a big vision, which we're going to get to later. But yes, the fact that I never have to see this mail, that I can view it on my dashboard, route it to the right person who can then deal with it, checks deposited. It's awesome what you are doing. You are making everyone's life a lot easier and are going to even continue to do so with some of these new features that are coming down the pike, which are exciting. But before we get to the future, let's turn back the clock a little bit. And I'd love to hear how you got to this place. You were a student at Northwestern. A good student, engineering student. The world was your oyster. You could have gone and chosen stability and a job, and yet you chose risk and the entrepreneurial path. Why?
Yeah, I've always been drawn to start something, be an entrepreneur. The first business I would say I had was actually when I was 10 years old. And this was back when MySpace was very big. So we're very many ages past that. But people, would decorate their pages. There would be different layouts, backgrounds. And so I got really into Photoshop at the time. So I would make a bunch of those different graphics, and then those websites that had all of that, I would sell it actually to those websites. And so what I did with that is like basically I was using my dad's PayPal account, and I was making thousands of dollars just like through this. And so before I even really knew what an entrepreneur was, that was like my first like true way to like test all of that. And then fast forward to college, I went to Northwestern University. My co-founder Colin, I actually lived on the same floor freshman year.
Nice.
And so both of us were involved with the garage there, which opened while we were there. And it's basically Northwestern's incubator space.
Cool.
And so you can start companies out of it. They give you a bunch of resources to help like make that happen. They have like guest speakers. So it was a really great experience. So I launched Hot Plate. And
tell us about that.
Yeah, so it was an app to help people find the best dishes at restaurants. So now I think that Google Maps, Yelp do actually a pretty good job at surfacing what the most popular dishes are. Yeah. But how many times that you've been at a restaurant and you're like trying to figure out
what do I order?
Yeah, so it was to answer that question. And so we built out the team. It was a really great experience too. Launching an app into the world. You realize some of the stuff that you assumed would work didn't. You have to go back and iterate. You're bringing it, like figuring out the go-to-market side of it. So very, very fun experience and awesome setting to do it in college, where it's like you have that safety net of everything else there. Coming out of that, I mean, we never got to a scale that I was like, okay, this is going to be like the full-time job after. But I still knew I really wanted to start something eventually. Yeah. And San Francisco to me was like where it all happens, right? Yeah. So I wanted to go out there after college. And so Northwestern being in Chicago is very much like weighing jobs like in the Chicago area versus like the Bay Area. So I ended up taking a role as a user experience engineer for a small health tech startup, just like Series A at the time. And so the main thing for me was that it got me out to the Bay Area, which I felt like was really important for that phase. Yeah.
And then did you catch the bug? Like once you were out there?
Yeah.
How did you and Colin get together? Where it happened to this startup where you were working?
So Colin and I, really great friends, and both of us, we were working for companies that like we physically went to an office, and this is all pre-pandemic too, is like the disclaimer. And what was interesting though is that we would spend all day on Zoom and in Slack because a lot of our team was actually distributed. So we were starting to see this inside glimpse that a lot was changing in the future of work, right? And more companies were going to start to adopt this model. And so that's what got us really interested. It was like, there's all these companies building for collaboration. How do you solve that? But what about the behind the scenes, like the actual operation side of it? And so Colin and I started working on different ideas nights and weekends. And so we went through a lot of different iterations, a lot of different products. And through all that, what we found is it was like we work really, really well together. So very complementary skill sets, where I come from more of like the design side. Of course, like he's more like on the technical side. So we ended up, when you come together, it's like, we could like get things out, test it, learn, iterate really, really fast. And very values aligned too, of like, ultimately like how would we want to build our team and all of that. So when we ended up quitting our jobs end of 2019. It was not stable yet, so it was an earlier idea. We were working on, it was called Mistro, and it was helping companies provide benefits internationally. So everything from co-working spaces to health insurance. And at the time, we had a few paid pilots signed. And I personally had just crossed the 1 year threshold. I was kind of ready to move on from that role. And so the day my stocks vested, I put in my notice.
Nice.
A lot of that in that early stage was taking a bet on ourselves. We had no funding at the time. And I had about like 6 months saved up. And I think to think about like the scrappy side of it, we like Colin and I have always been very scrappy, but it also comes from like a personal place too, where it's like, okay, like even living in San Francisco at the time, which is like, more expensive than most cities, but it's just like having, like knowing that how much you actually need to like, if you're going after your dream, you can really like make some of those sacrifices in the day to day. And I was like, worst case, I'll go and get a different job, right? I will say, again, the job market was a little different than it is today, but that was like the backstop around that.
It sounds like you weren't like, oh my God, this is so scary. You were kind of like, I want to do this, and if it doesn't work out, you were ready to, you were happy to take the leap.
I think the interesting thing is that when you're a year out of college, the opportunity cost that you're weighing is very different than like,
absolutely,
now, here we are, like, I'm about to turn 30. And it's like, I know that like if I stayed in the tech path, like what my role would look like how much money I would be making, and like what would that lifestyle be that I would be like scared to give up, right?
Yeah.
But at that time, like I wasn't making a ton of money. Like I was like, hey, if anything, this is gonna be an amazing experience and I'm gonna learn a ton, and it's actually gonna accelerate my career at that stage faster than like just continuing down like the startup or like tech path. That's like more like working for other people. So I think it's just like a lot of it is like the different mindset. And I think that's what is so cool about Silicon Valley and tech, is that like we take chances on these like young entrepreneurs, because we know that the risk tolerance sometimes around that is like you're able to do that and you're so excited to. So I think for me it was like always knowing that, hey, like this is something that I really want to do. I believe like you spend so much time of your day working, so it should be something that you enjoy ultimately. And so that was the big part of it.
So your stock vests, you quit your job, you take the plunge and go into this with, both feet. What happens next?
Yeah, so the first thing we needed to get was funding. So we go out to raise our pre-seed, and K-Ball, Shakti, was actually one of the first checks in.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How did you meet K-Ball, and what'd you think when you first encountered?
So going back to the Northwestern time, so as part of the garage, so the executive director, Melissa, at that time, so they had all arranged for us to go out to San Francisco for a trip. And this was like senior year of college. And so once we're out there, they arranged a bunch of like tours, like a bunch of coffee chats. It's actually really cool. We got to meet Brian Chesky, who's founder of Airbnb, go to the office, we went to the Uber office. But they also had like this round of coffee chats, and Melissa paired me with K-Ball. And so the first time I met him and, had a great conversation, I also let him know that I'm like job hunting at that time. And so he helped me with like intros, like, getting, my foot in like, okay, what might be like that first job out of college. And then once I moved out to the Bay Area, still stayed in touch. And so, and the funny thing here is like, I as I mentioned, Colin and I are going through so many different ideas. Every few months we would call up K-Ball and ask him to grab coffee and just like run whatever idea that we were working on by him. And so, we'd gone through like a few iterations of these like coffees with him. And I think the big thing about that is like you can get a sense of how people think. Like how are they validating ideas? How are they invalidating them? Like are they talking to potential customers? All of that. And you build a lot of trust. And so, I do think it is really important that founders go full time if they're gonna like really do this, raise money. Like you have to take the bet on yourself first. Like I strongly believe that. So when that was the case, it showed that like, hey, we're serious about this, right? And so so we went back to K-Ball. I think he knew he was going to write a check, but he definitely, pulled us through the ringer a little bit with the questions because, preparing us for what you're going to face in fundraising. And so went through some back and forth, some questions, but ultimately was one of the first checks in and also helped to put the round together too. Amazing. And so really strong intros to other folks that we ended up working with in the earliest stage of the company.
That's so great. So you got some funding and you're on your way. How did you build the company? How did you get to over 10,000 customers, the place where you are today from that risky moment?
So we got the pre-seed. We also went through Y Combinator. All of this was on our previous idea. So we ended up pivoting to stable actually in the midst of the pandemic. So very crazy time to do that.
Yeah.
But we really saw just like the need around us. Like personally, like as business owners, like we also struggle with, hey, like you're moving you're moving like from like your home address to like different places. You're like losing important documents, getting fined. Like we were using like a UPS store at that time. And it was just like a mess to have to go and like check it. Like they always had like long lines. And then we talked to hundreds of like operations managers and founders that were like, what did they use? And, you know, it always came back to like, there's just a lot of the challenges around the business address and mail. And a lot of like the incumbents out there, I mean, they've been around since like the 2000s and it's like very clunky software, like you can't get in touch with a human. And so we just saw this like really big opportunity to take this like Silicon Valley approach of building, like build something that people really like want to use and like need, but also make it very customer centric. Like, you know, always get in touch with like a real person, right? And so that was like really the ethos in which like we launched Stable. And in that too, like because we had gone through so many months on like different other ideas, right? We wanted to really very much like test that like this was going to work. And so we, like, luckily because we went through YC, that was like a really great network for us to test. We had like a landing page. We launched within that community, and we had like dozens and dozens of founders just like messaging us, like wanting to get started with Stable. But we actually had nothing behind the scenes. So we like scrambled in the next few weeks to like figure it out. We found like our mail partner in SF, like super awesome, still work with them today. And our MVP was just like, we put the address in a Google Doc. And then when you get mail, we would like upload it to Google Drive, like manually send emails. Like we were onboarding customers on Zoom, like sending them a Stripe checkout link. Like there was no dashboard for the first 100 customers, but it really like validated that like market need.
That is so cool. I love how you scrapped it all together. Tell us about some of the challenges, or a challenge perhaps, that you faced along the way. And then I'm going to flip it to, I want to hear about sort of a big triumphant moment where you were like, oh my gosh, I think this might work. But first, let's start with like the hard part.
Yeah. I mean, in the early days, you're wearing all the hats, right? So before we had a team even, like we were scaling so fast, like it was this thing that like, and everything was so manual. Like we couldn't keep up with like how fast we need to build out the technology, especially like behind the scenes. And so we were like manually, and this is also like pre-AI. So like so much of this is automated now, but it's like, so you get the piece of mail and you have to like, you know, transcribe like who the sender is, like who's the mail for, like what's the mailbox number. Like me and Colin were doing that in the early days and like typing that out for like hundreds of pieces of mail every single month, if not more than that even. And so it was just like, and we were doing that. Like there was so many of these like manual workflows behind the scenes that like, you know, to our customers, always been a magical experience. And that's like what we've prided ourselves on. Like you just like don't have to think about it and it just shows up, right? But like everything behind the scenes was like not automated. And we just felt like we were in such a hole. You know, like it's like you didn't even have time to hire because of just like the load of how much we had to do day to day to keep like the operations going. And like the truth about mail too is like it's very time sensitive. Like if you get a notice, like you have to respond sometimes within like a matter of a few days. And so it's not like we could like let this queue just like increase. And we were also doing support in those days. So, like it was great because it was like I knew every single customer. Like was this a founder, was an operations manager, and you know at this scale, like there's no way I would know every single one of our customers today. But it's like just having all of that. But it was, I think that was one of the toughest times because it's like, you know, when it's like you're grateful to have the problem that you're like, things are scaling and moving so fast. But at the same time, it was like very hard to see ourselves like get out of the hole. We ended up getting some folks in the Philippines to help with some of like the manual data entry. And then soon after that, started building out like our first like team members, like our founding team members. So that was like, I would say, the turning point in a lot of it.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine you and Colin sitting there like doing all that manual work. Tell me about the moment when you were like, oh my gosh, I think we might have something here. Like we're doing this.
Yeah, I think like as founders, it always feels like mentally it takes longer to catch up with reality.
Yeah.
So I would say like even though, we started like working with these like bigger companies and like really like getting more and more customers, it wasn't until we like crossed the like $1 million ARR threshold that I would say that like it truly felt like we hit that turning point. And I think a lot of it is just like how that is a milestone that's like so portrayed of like, hey, if you get to that, you have like product market fit.
Right.
And I agree. It's like there's a solid foundation that you have if you can get there. But I think the truth is also you get to 1 million, you're like, okay, what about like 10 million? What about 100 million? And it's like, okay, like things are just gonna keep getting harder. Yeah.
Let's talk about people. Founders are always coming to us with questions and requests for help hiring.
Yeah.
You just mentioned that finally when you dug out of that hole, you were able to hire your team. What did you look for in those early hires? That seems like such an important part of the journey.
Yeah.
You've got your little family, you and your co-founder, and now you're kind of expanding it.
Yeah.
Tell us
Yeah,
what
I mean,
works.
hiring is hard. I think especially for like the pro of if you start a company later in your career is that you probably have a really strong network of people that you can just pull from. But us being so early career, there wasn't necessarily like a person that we were like, okay, we can call and like we know that they're gonna like come. Like it was like we had to like recruit. We had to just like find people that were very like scrappy, hungry to like wear a bunch of hats. So like YC has like an internal like job forum, like work at a startup. But that was honestly like how we found a lot of our early hires. So I think our first 2, but definitely even within our first like 10, a lot of them were through that that network. So also if people are looking, I would say it's a really great way to get in touch with startups. But yeah, I mean, it's hard because like there's so much like good competition. Like I think in the early days, like you can't promise like salary or benefits or like anything like that. Like it truly is people that like you're excited to just like get in the trenches with. And I mean, it took us like far too long to hire our first few people. Like, yes, we were in this hole, but it was also just like, we were saying no to a lot of candidates. And I do think that was the right decision though, because like the early people create the foundation for everything. Like they're the foundation for the team to come, and just like, how are you gonna operate?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes down to just like how Colin and I operate. Like in the early days, like there's so many companies doing like cool things, but the really like competitive advantage is just like, how do you want to build this team, and how do you make sure that that's very clear, like in the candidate process. And that's like, I think like a big reason why people like pick the early stage companies that they do, because like, you just don't know what's going to happen. And when you're taking that leap, it's like for an early employee at that point where you're like one of the first employees at a company, like that risk is almost the same as like the founder's risk.
Totally.
Yeah.
How do you close them? Did Kval help at all?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit
Kval
about
talked
that.
to definitely like our first like 10 hires. And yeah, such a help, because those are the types of things that also help get you over that edge, right? It's like when early employees can like have that experience of talking to a VC, which like, in their day-to-day, they aren't necessarily doing that. And also hearing like their perspective. Because I do think that like the early supporters from like, our early investors is like that type of excitement is very contagious, right? So yeah, a huge help in that. And that's like, I think just shows like one of the examples of like Shakti going above and beyond what is like expected of like typical investors even.
That's great. Okay, let's pivot to kind of the future. You are humming. You have a major customer base. You have a platform, and you've been rolling out some cool new features. Sarah, where do you see Stable 10 years from now? What are you doing? What does the product look like? What problems are you solving?
Yeah, we believe millions of businesses will use Stable. The way that we see it is that a lot of the rules that dictate how companies operate were written back in the 1800s. And of course, today we're moving towards this AI-driven future. So how do you bridge the gap between the two? And so there's a lot of operations behind the scenes that's still really broken and archaic. And our job is to automate all of that. And so while we started with this like very sticky use case around address and mail, we know that that's just the beginning. beginning of what is possible. And so, you know, in 10 years, we really see like every business from like the early stage, again, like solopreneurs to large like public companies using Stable to automate their operations.
Of course, I have to ask about AI because that's what's happening in our world right now. How does AI fit into what you guys are doing and building?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold, right? So from like an operations perspective, like we've integrated a lot behind the scenes to like speed up our operations. I think there's like the very obvious pieces that I alluded to of like automatically like extracting the data, but there's like very interesting use cases also that around just like how when you're storing mail like in our facility, like what's the optimal way to actually like retrieve those pieces and like, you know, instead of like writing like a very complex algorithm, you can actually utilize AI to like speed that up. So it's like we're always thinking just like what can we do there, and there's more in the works for our customers as well to start like integrating more and more of that on their side. I would say like the other part of it though is just like how are teams using AI, right, internally. And so I think that like it is really important that like every person is thinking about how do I augment my own workflows, how do I get more done.
How are they doing that?
Yeah, and it's like we're for support, like we rolled out for some of like our simple use cases, like more like AI responses, make it very clear that you can always get in touch with a human, right? And I think like that's been a huge unlock. Of course, like our engineers are using Cursor and all of that. I personally found it very helpful to use ChatGPT as like a thought partner, right? It's like, give me feedback on this and like, how can I improve this? And it's like where you would traditionally find someone to like riff on a certain idea. You can kind of just like do that with AI. Because I mean,
totally
and you don't feel bad too.
No, right, because you're not like, oh, I'm sorry to be taking up your time, or
or if the ideas aren't good, like if it's a person, you have to like, you know, think about their feelings. But it's like if the AI ideas are bad, it's just like, okay, not using any of that.
Yeah, totally. That's really interesting. Well, you are now a seasoned entrepreneur, and Shakti is talking to a lot of new entrepreneurs who are coming up, interested in raising their pre-seed, seed round. What would you tell a up-and-coming entrepreneur about working with Keval and the Shakti team?
Yeah, I would say like one of the best investors that you can have on your cap table. But I truly mean it, not just because you're on this
podcast. Be honest. No, seriously. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. So a big part of it is like, I feel like we're true like partners, right? There's a lot of people on the cap table that, you know, give you some money and you'll never talk to them again. But like, it really feels like it's been a true partnership throughout this whole journey. Like Colin and I have gone through our whole like 20s, like building this company too, right? And it's like, we really feel like Keval and like the whole like Shakti team has like been there as just like, you know, I always like enjoy going to the different events because it's like, there's such a curated, amazing community that's there. And it's just like, even despite like, you know, as we continue to build a bigger business, it's like, I think sometimes to certain companies, it's like they kind of like forget about their early investors, or the early investors forget about their portfolio companies. But that's just not the case. Like, it's like, we're still so tied in together, and like Keval especially has like helped us see around corners all the time. Like, he'll give you unsolicited advice that you never asked for, but it always has like a little bit of truth to it. And it's like, you know, figuring out like what is the part of it that like, you know, you're gonna have to like figure out this problem like down the line. So you might as well start thinking about it now.
Yeah. Are you ready for the lightning round, Sarah?
Let's
okay, I'm gonna get my lightning round questions out. All right, we're gonna speed through these. Okay, Sarah, tell us one book, podcast, or person that every founder should know.
Yeah, the book, The Great CEO Within. So much good tactical advice. I think like one of the best like books that have tactical advice than anything I've read. So recommend every founder read it.
Good one. Going back to your first fundraise, would you hire a cheap, like a less expensive lawyer or an expensive lawyer?
Expensive, for sure.
Why?
So your first fundraise itself is probably like, you're probably just doing it on safe. So there's like, that itself is very cheap. But any mistakes that you're making in the early days is going to cost you a lot down the line, cost you a lot of headache. So it's better just to get it right.
Where to incorporate your company? Delaware or Texas?
So Delaware for C Corps, Texas for LLCs.
PM, product manager or no product manager?
No product manager. We don't have any product managers at Stable today.
Okay, and why?
Well, we believe that engineers and designers should really lean into a lot of that too, like have like that product mindset. And at the end of the day, that builds the best product.
What's the first app you open in the morning?
Unfortunately, probably Slack.
Hire salespeople before your first million or after your first million?
After.
Why?
Founders need to learn how to sell their own product first. And the initial sales playbook needs to come from one of the founders. And then from there, you can start to scale out the sales team.
Wise. Okay, my final question of this conversation and of our lightning round. If you could gift every founder one tool, physical or digital, what would it be?
Plane tickets.
I love that. Yes, explain.
Yeah, you should definitely take a trip, take time off. I try to take at least one international trip every single year, and then take a full week off. And I think it's so important to just like decompress and then come back and feel even more energized than before.
I love that, Sarah. Super proud to be a Stable customer, super proud to be on your cap table, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.